Good morning and welcome to OTBAM. It's Friday morning. You're very welcome on in. Delighted to have you with us on this freezing cold Friday morning. It certainly feels that winter is here, but to help warm things up over the next little while, I'm delighted to say we're joined in the studio by renowned, famous sports writer, broadcaster, TV star, Johnny Ward.
You said you'd be honest now, to be fair. But it is freezing.
Let's start off as we mean to go on, you know.
I don't get up as early as I did this morning very often, and walking around Dublin in sub-zero temperatures at 6 o'clock in the morning is an interesting experience. It was very, very cold, frost all over the cars and all that, but I actually much prefer this weather to like 13 degrees in November, which was the other day. I find that completely unnatural. Yeah,
it's Black Friday, is obviously really exciting, people. We're apparently on the brink of an election. I mean, I'm sure these are the sort of things that make you sort of hop out of bed of a Friday morning, Johnny.
Yeah. Black Friday is interesting. I saw there in the back of one of the papers there was a drone for sale for €1,300. You could do a lot of good things with that.
That would seem to strike me as a little expensive. I mean, I think you can get them cheaper than that.
You can?
You know? Yeah.
You could do a lot of things with a drone, though, you know, when you think about it. Yeah.
Stuff that we can talk about on a Friday morning and we're live on broadcast, is that?
I haven't put... Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, all above board. I haven't put a lot of thought into this, but Black Friday, it is a bit of a fad, though, isn't it?
It's a total fad, yeah. I was in the States maybe 2 years ago for Black Friday, and they go absolutely nuts for it, and you do get carried away with it. And it's only really around that same time that it's kind of started to come in here as a thing. And it's, I mean, people sort of rail, it's a hipster thing to kind of rail against it.
Thing. Next thing we'll have Thanksgiving as well, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, all for that. Anything that has involved a turkey dinner, Johnny, I'm okay with that.
I have a friend who works for Twitter, and they had an amazing Thanksgiving spread yesterday. Although I actually spent time in Twitter last week, they treat their workers extremely well. It's like a workers' utopia.
Well, feed them well, and you know, you knock out those 15-hour days, Johnny. That's what it's all about. Right, we have a busy show coming up for you between now and 9 o'clock. We're going to be getting into the back pages of what's in the newspaper this morning very shortly. Get Johnny's take on all of that. We're going to be getting the football view. We've usually very loosely entitled that item. Nathan Murphy and Kevin Kilbane are also up early on this Friday morning. They're going to drop into us in a little bit to look ahead to the weekend's Premier League. We're going to, I mean, it's the thing you've been waiting for all week, obviously, the BarryOmeter. Conor McGregor features in it this week. Maybe not for all the right reasons, so we'll get to that in a little while. We're going to have, because we've Johnny in studio, of course, we're going to talk a bit of racing, some interesting stories across the back pages, including one of his own this morning, so that's to come in a little bit. Shane Stapleton has been out and about. You may have seen this feature on offtheball.com, but if you haven't, it's worth checking out all 8 or 9 minutes of the shortened version. I'm sure the longer version will be coming out soon as well. That interview with GAA referee David Gough, really interesting piece, so we're going to bring you a flavour of that a bit later on. We're going to be hearing from Cian Healy as well. Ocean's been out and about to talk to the Ireland prop ahead of the final game of the Guinness November Series against Argentina at the Aviva Stadium tomorrow. We will be there as well, by the way, at the Aviva fan studio. And we're going to have a very special lineup as well. Andrew Trimble is going to be there, Niamh Briggs is going to be there, and Mike McCarthy, the ever-entertaining Mike McCarthy. Just check back at the Off the Ball Twitter feed if you need evidence of that. Are all going to be there to preview and bring the halftime and full-time analysis from Ireland against Argentina. So that's what's coming your way over the next hour and a little bit. If you want to get in contact with us, you can just use the hashtag OTBAM. Leave a comment here on our Facebook page, or whatever you're having yourself. Get in contact with us and let us know what's floating your boat this Friday morning. A little bit of a flavour of what's happening in sport today. David Unsworth is saying that he's going to stay on as the Everton manager. Sure, why wouldn't he? They were beaten 5-1 last night by Atalanta in the Europa League, which, I mean, you know, I watched a little bit of the game and sort of got a bit bored by the fact that it was all sort of headed in one direction. Watching Wayne Rooney, it turns out, has become the most interesting thing you can do from an point of view. He was grand. He was fine. I'd say Wayne Rooney is sort of at that point of his career where he understands that the major achievements in his career have long passed him, and this is a bit of a seeing things out to the end from his point of view. But like, it was 5-1 and sort of fair enough. A little bit sad, but I mean, everything about Everton at the minute is a little bit sad. Yeah, and actually it's kind of strange because obviously horse racing and soccer are my two kind of main sports, but in racing, if you have a juvenile hurdler who starts off hurling at 3 years of age, you expect that he will basically be over the top younger in his life than a horse who starts later. And my flatmate said to me the other night, he goes, "You've got to remember how young Rooney was when he started playing.
like half a lifetime ago on the rest or whatever, and he's probably just a bit washed up at this stage, and the big move hasn't worked out. But losing 5-1 at home to a middle of the road Italian team is shocking stuff from everything.
It struck me as a game where the team has just no interest in playing for the manager. That's, I mean, we spoke about it on the show a couple of weeks ago. Joey Barton came out and had some, I don't know if you saw them, but some like despicable quotes about David Unsworth, about, you know, the fact that he was overweight, that this was impacting on his capacity to do his job, that the players were looking at him going, well, if you can't manage your exercise and your diet, then I'm not going to follow it either, which I don't buy.
Could be at
all. I don't buy it at all. I mean, Kevin Kilbane, who has been in those environments, says that actually there might be something in it, but that's a poor reflection, I think, on footballers. If they can't disassociate themselves from somebody who's the manager of the team, and it's not a requirement for him, it's not part of the job spec. David Unsworth, could you lose 3 stone, please, and set a good example for everybody. But I mean, outside of all of that, it just doesn't seem as if things are going his way. He wants the job. I mean, like, that's, what else is he going to say? He's going to be asked about it after the game.
They look like real relegation candidates,
yeah,
which would be quite shocking. Yeah. And have they improved under him? You know, the Koeman stuff was fascinating, really. Like, what a fall from grace.
Yeah,
you know?
well, I mean, it's the way things are going. Koeman could be back on the radar soon enough. Arsenal lost out in the Europa League, the first time for them to be beaten in the Europa League this season. They lost to Cologne by a goal to 0. It didn't make any difference. They're topping Group H anyway, and they're headed on through to the next phase. And it was an unfortunate goal to concede. It was a penalty that really shouldn't have been, and a game that they probably dominated in a way. But it doesn't really make any great difference. I don't think to Arsenal, the grander scheme of things, they'll be looking to build on the win over Spurs last weekend. We're going to talk to Kevin and Nathan about that in a bit. West Ham Leicester tonight, also kind of an interesting one. Obviously, David Moyes' first home game in charge of West Ham.
He's 9 in the last chance saloon in terms of his coaching career, I think, because Aidan O'Hara had a great piece in The Independent last Monday about his reaction to the game last week, coming out about some of his players. You know, they're kind of big names, but we see in the papers today as well, he obviously allegedly had a big go at Andy Carroll, who was almost sent off last week, is probably going to start tonight. I'd fancy Leicester to win that game, to be honest. I'm really not sure about Moyes at this point in his career. He's old school, but what do the players see when they see David Moyes at this stage, you know? And he can argue that he did okay at Man United. In relative terms, he actually didn't do that badly. Yeah. But then if you look at like the Spanish disaster, and I think the Sunderland job was the one he probably shouldn't have taken, because there wasn't much of an upside there, and he could end up managing in the League of Ireland, I think, if West Ham doesn't work out for him, you know, or possibly manage Ireland, who knows. But you know, this job, he has to keep them up. Fascinating game tonight, it has to be said. You know, I'm feeling the lull with no League of Ireland action, but the games like this would certainly whet my appetite. There's just so much going on at a human level, you know, and he will already appreciate, like, if they lose tonight, you know, he'll look even more ashen-faced than he normally does.
Is he playing the West Ham way? Is going to be, you know, this sort of nonsense of the West Ham way that we've picked up over the last while? But I mean, I don't like the Sunderland thing. I kind of give him a bit of a free pass for, because the club is a bit of a basket case at the best of times.
But he knew that.
Yeah, he knew that. And the Spain thing, like, it's a good... We're going to talk about Ronald O'Gara in a bit. He's off to New Zealand to learn his trade there. Like, I wouldn't hold that against him necessarily. He's taken a leap into the unknown to a degree, and...
United job?
You assume. Yeah, like, I think you make a fair point. Like, it's... the difficulty for Moyes in that job is that, like, he's literally coming in after the best manager of all time at any club. Not that arguably. That's difficult. Like his, you know, Louis van Gaal came in, and I was at a couple of games that he managed, and the football was horrific to look at.
Watching them midweek, it's questionable how much they've even improved under Mourinho.
Yeah, but I mean, I think they're probably getting a few more results, and that helps. I think that, I don't think that David Moyes really was ever a Manchester United manager, I think, is the point. But he probably is. If he's not at West Ham, I think he's at West Ham level at least. But I guess he's going to get a bit of time to prove that.
You're right about that nonsense about, like, the West Ham way and all that. Like, you know, get results.
Get results. It's a results game. That's what it's all about. So that's West Ham Leicester tonight, and we have had a couple of comments into us. One from Kevin Kilbane, which I'm assuming is in relation to my comments about the David Unsworth situation. He says, "Who said they agree? Who said they agree with that statement? Pardon?" He says.
Followed me on Twitter this morning.
Oh, did he really? Right.
So tired coming in, give me a real pep in myself.
Well, when you get to follow from Kevin Kilbane, you know, I mean, I watch out with your tweeting, because he's very pernickety about sort of quality and grammar and all of that sort of stuff. I think he's pulling me up with the David Unsworth quotes, but what I was saying, I mean, look, maybe Kev, you can sort of like drop us a text or send us a Facebook message or whatever to clarify what's going on there. And Noel Cahill, who's in a real Friday, getting the spirit of Black Friday this morning. I'd love to see Everton get relegated. So,
why?
You know, he hasn't clarified any of that, but
Everton
he's a Liverpool fan.
They're a big club, and they've been running in quite a noble fashion over the years. You know, I don't like clubs that bring in all these sugar daddies. I wouldn't like to see Everton relegated. I think they're a big club.
They have had a bit of a change of ownership over the last while. They have,
to be fair.
Come in, but
and then you also have like Goodison Park's been a great place to watch football. Like in an era when the atmosphere in Premier League games is, you know, probably becoming more prawn sandwich than what it was. Goodison Park has remained true to being a great place to watch football.
Yeah, really old school.
Absolutely.
They're tearing it down, obviously. They've got plans to head away, and contracts have been signed. And
yeah, it's remarkable how close it is to Anfield if you visit Liverpool, like these two big clubs, but I wouldn't like to see them go down.
Yeah, too big to be relegated, Johnny. I think
not true. Galway United got relegated this season.
Well, I mean, look, case in point. And the other thing in the sports news this morning is that Ireland are going to have their final run out at the Aviva Stadium today ahead of that final test against Argentina, and it's a revenge mission, obviously, for the World Cup. So Ireland against Argentina, they'll have that run out at the Aviva Stadium today. That's what is happening at the in the world of sport on this Friday morning. It's 4 minutes to 8 o'clock. Delighted to have you along. Keep your comments coming into us here on the hashtag OTBAM or on Facebook or whatever else. We're going to take a bit of a pick through what's happening across the back pages of the sports sections today. We're going to begin with the Examiner because there's some interesting stuff here. Ronan O'Gara obviously has his weekly column, and it's something that we come back to every single week. Super move reads the headline here. Ronan O'Gara with the inside story on his sensational move to the Crusaders. It's one of the best pieces across the back pages today, and interesting stuff. From O'Gara, he'd kind of spoken a bit about it last week, but now the cat is out of the bag. He's signed and he's on the move, and he's talked, Johnny, a bit about how this whole thing came about. And you kind of think you never have any great perception of how these, like, who picks up the phone first or sort of what's going on. So it turns out he's sort of wandering around the gym, and Dan Carter sidles up to him and he's like, "Oh, Ronan, yeah, ever think about maybe you might coach in New Zealand at some point? Like, is that something that you'd be thinking about?" And in the course of just general conversation, he's obviously saying, well, yeah, I'd certainly consider something. I mean, that's an interesting thing. Not really thinking too much of it. And Dan comes back a couple of weeks later and the conversation is kicking up a notch, and suddenly, before you know it, he's signed along the dotted line.
Yeah, and you know, I'm not sure how that article is written. You know, they're often ghostwritten by journalists or whatever, but it's really well put together, and it makes for great reading, you know. And Rog is obviously such a droll character. I think he talks about, like, you know, the Crusaders are exactly the club I want, like, all about the crack and all that. And Rog would have said that with a real deadpan, straight face. You can imagine him and Carter. I think they were sort of in that period where you're taking a break from your reps or whatever, you know, and you can just imagine him coming over like beads of sweat. So, you know, what do you make of New Zealand? And Rod is probably like, well, sure, whatever. Yeah. You know, and then all of a sudden, but it's a fascinating article, and as you were telling me earlier before, the family want to come back to Paris afterwards, which I found quite intriguing, because I was saying to you that I thought, like, I've never been to New Zealand, but everyone who's been there tells me it's quite like Ireland in many respects. They're quite laid back, and I was saying, you know, living in New Zealand, despite being whatever 1,000 miles away, might actually feel more like Ireland than France. But he wants the kids to nail their French.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, fascinating. Because I think most people would have been following the story over the last while and thinking, well, this is great. He's going to go to New Zealand for a year. He might go for 2 years, and then, because he's spoken himself about I mean, I think everybody accepts that he wants to come and work with Munster. He wants to come and work with Ireland. I think that's just very much something that's going to happen. But everybody sort of assumed that once he gets this done, gets all that sort of wanderlust out of his system, that he's coming back here. But he says here, we've already agreed that if and when I'm done in New Zealand, it will be back to Paris we move. I will hopefully have a little time out at that stage, and we want the kids to do another year in school in France to nail the language. So, I mean, that kind of puts paid to the idea that this is a direct path from Racing to Canterbury to Limerick. It does. It's going to be circuitous. I mean, he's even hinting there that he says, I'll hopefully have a little time out at that stage. So he's already thinking that I've gone directly from being a player into a very serious coaching role, and I might need to get a bit of a breather at some point.
What's the consensus on his coaching so far?
Brilliant by all accounts, but like the thing, I mean, from the fact that Dan Carter has had a conversation with the Crusaders, so the Crusaders have obviously rung Dan Carter, would be my perception, and said, listen, what's this guy like? We're kind of thinking he might be somebody we'd like to work with. And it's not often that coaches from the Northern Hemisphere head the other direction. I mean, you only have to have a Kiwi accent to get a sort of coaching job up this end. But so, like by all accounts, it's good. But like the other thing is that we don't really have a full perception of the qualities of Ronan O'Gara as a coach, because we hear from him a couple of times a year, because he goes off and he's in Racing, and then he's in the Champions Cup, so we have a little bit of an opportunity to dip in and out and see what he's about. And he's done some work with the Ireland team, but I mean that's only going to be exaggerated now when he goes to work in New Zealand, and we definitely won't be hearing anything about him. I mean, in any context, you know, he's off the radar now from an Irish point of view for the next year or two or whatever.
I guess there will be a lot of interest in it, though. You know, people will be very much keeping tabs with him, and I think it's a bit like horse racing trainers going to different yards, like going to, you know, the States, going to Australia to pick up different things. I would imagine
they do that, do they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The aspiring trainers, and I imagine he's going to pick up stuff there, and philosophies and, you know, mindsets that are alien to the Northern Hemisphere. And I do like it in rugby that, you know, there seems to be more of a willingness to go like to France and to go different places than in football, where it just seems to be it's always England or it's always Britain. Like, and I was saying this to you also before the show about I was at the PFAI Awards the other night, and the doorman started talking to me, and over the course of asking him for a light for a cigarette, and he told me he actually had done a bit of scouting for Highjuk Split. He was Croatian at the cup final, and he'd looked at a couple of games, and he'd gotten a few inquiries from big clubs in Croatia about Stephen Kenny.
Right.
Can you imagine Stephen Kenny going to coach in somewhere like Croatia? Yeah. Now this man could have been a complete. He could have been spoofing, but I actually don't think he was. We would like
here at OTBAM to disassociate ourselves from the guy at the door who was giving Johnny a light.
He played football with Cerna. In Croatia, and he was at the cup final. He'd watched a couple of games, and the two League of Ireland players that he really liked were Akinade, who's now moved to Watford, and McElhenney, whose future is slightly in doubt, and in my view should be in the Ireland squad without a shadow of a doubt.
Right.
If you're able to, you know, dominate a game against Rosenborg, I think you should be good enough to play in the Ireland squad. But the O'Gara thing is fascinating. I definitely think he's seen how will this improve me as a coach, because I will come back from this better. And I admire the family, the sense that, like, it's very difficult to uproot like that, you know.
And his kids are, I think he has 5 kids. Most of what they know now is Paris. Like, we kind of think about, I think it was 2013 he went there, and we all sort of still think about it as a relatively new thing, but like, I mean, to all intents and purposes, his kids are French. Like, and so you're being uprooted from everything you know. And he talks about the piece as well, another completely selfish move.
I like that.
Like, he's got that self-awareness enough to know that, look, I'm sorry about this, but like, it's the thing. And like, to be fair, he's not being a martyr here. He's, I'm sure, being extremely well compensated for uprooting and moving down there. I'm sure there's a very strong financial reason for doing it as well.
Sure, but there's a searing honesty in that piece, you know, and I do admire O'Gara. You know, I'm obviously not the biggest rugby man in the world, but had a couple of dealings with him over his ownership of horses in the past, and you know, he has his own way of talking, but he's very likeable. You know, and he's obviously, you know, the après-match sketch is like, you know, I'm really excited, and, you know, his face doesn't move, but I think it'll be intriguing over there, you know. And when is he going to be the Munster coach, I suppose? He
has shares in horses?
He's owned horses, yeah. He owned a horse called You're Busy, which won the Kerry National under Katie Walsh. He owned a very good filly with David Watchman, who's now retired. And I had the opportunity to get his mobile number one time, and I rang him, and he ended the conversation by going, like, you know, if you get a few tips, don't be afraid to send them on, like, you know. Yeah. And I never did.
Who doesn't want that, you know?
Thankfully, he's actually, rather get tips from me, you know, he's flourished in his career.
Yeah. Just one other quote from this piece, because it is fascinating and highly recommend. He writes a weekly column for the Examiner, and every week it definitely comes up. And I mean, it's been very interesting, obviously, with the Crusader stuff happening over the last few weeks. But do pick up a copy today. He says about Dan Carter, who in the initial conversation, the second conversation, Dan said to him, "I hate doing this because I want the best coaches here at Racing, but I have to tell you, the Crusaders are asking, and I've given you a strong reference. Deadpan Dan." As Ron O'Gara puts it.
He called him Deadpan.
Deadpan Dan.
Pretty deadpan himself now.
Yeah, he is pretty deadpan. In fairness, he does a good line in Deadpan. So it's an interesting piece. It's an interesting story as well, and we shall follow it over the next while. Munster fans, let us know. I mean, it does seem as if it's not going to be in the next few years that Ronan O'Gara is going to be making his way to Limerick, but we shall see what happens after that. That's the Examiner today. In the Irish Times, it's rugby all the way here as well, ahead of the big test against Argentina tomorrow. Experimental remains name of the game for Schmidt, writes Jerry Thornley, who's at Carton House. So Adam Byrne, James Ryan and Chris Farrell given the chance to make an impression against Argentina. Gavin Cummesky writing about an impressive, by all accounts, James Ryan here as well. Ryan ready to fill sizable expectations. Schmidt impressed here by his work ethic and his physique, and it's rugby all the way, as I said, on the front page of the Irish Times sports section this morning. On the Irish edition of the Times, meanwhile, young guns had a trial by Schmidt, writes Gary Doyle out there on the left hand side, as you can see, and one unknown, unheralded journalist on the right hand side there with an interesting exclusive. Bookmaker won't back rule change by Johnny Ward. Talk to us.
Yeah, so I'm obviously a freelance journalist now, so I try to sell a paper, a story, and the Times, I suppose, are trying to grow the Irish edition over here, and a very brave move to come onto the market at a time when, you know, they say papers are in difficulty. They've come on and they're selling the paper for €1 introductory offer, and they've embraced some of the racing stories I've given them, and I think they have an interest, particularly in the betting side of things, because on At the Races quite recently there was a debate from the Coral representative Simon Clare and Kevin Blake, who's a very well-known figure, just about where bookmaking is at the moment. And the likes of yourself, Adrian, and the vast majority of people watching and listening in this morning will not know that bookmakers are apt to do some extremely, you know, questionable things in terms of closing down accounts, while at the same time accommodating people who are quite obviously problem gamblers.
You've spoken to a couple of bookmakers on this topic. That's the essence of the piece here today.
So 2 weeks ago, Brian Kavanagh, who's head of HRI, he called for an overhaul of gambling regulation in Ireland. And when he's calling for an overhaul, there basically is none. They can do whatever they want. In effect, you know, there's certainly been money laundering going on in lots of shops now. There's an EU directive coming in to stop that. But they basically can do what they want. And, you know, they're in the business of making money, so they'll try to make money in a true capitalist way. But Brian Kavanagh, you know, endorsed the idea of having to lay a minimum bet of €1,000 liability, for example, on Irish racing, which I think is laudable.
What does that, will you tell us what that means for in layman's language?
Sure. So Paddy Power speaks in that piece today about, like, the average stake is about 20 quid, and I've no reason to believe that's wrong. There are others who will bet heavier. 50 quid at 20 to 1 equates to €1,000 liability. So what I would be asking, Kevin Blake has said the same thing. This is something that's been kind of pioneered and successful in New South Wales and Australia, albeit a slightly different model over there. If I go into Paddy Power shop this morning, they are entitled and obliged to lay me a liability of €1,000 win only on a horse race. So if the horse is even money, they're obliged to lay me at least €1,000. If the horse is 6 to 1, they're obliged to lay me €166.
So is the point that they can't refuse your bet? Is that the...
Yeah, or at least up to €1,000.
Yeah.
You know, in order to get a license in this country, because
and at the minute they can pick and choose that they can do business with you or not do business with you.
I had a friend who was in Cheltenham last weekend for the racing that was going on, and of course, being a punter, he wanted to bet on the rugby, whoever was playing some game in England on the Saturday night. He went into a bookmaker. I'm not even sure what bookmaker it was. He asked for X amount on the handicap on the spread. He waited 10 minutes as they made a phone call to head office to be told he could have €130 at a much shorter price, and then they slashed the handicap. So they used him as a means of information but didn't lay him a bet. Right. And that's par for the course now. And accounts are being opened and closed, you know, with such regularity now. And again, James Knight of Ladbrokes Coral alludes to this. It's hard to police accounts, and there's a famous case going on in Northern Ireland at the moment where a girl called Megan McCann placed these bets, and Bet365 are arguing that they weren't her bets, and under their terms and conditions they're thus null and void, and I think the case has involved 7 figures. But bookmakers can basically get away with what they want, and
I mean, and to a degree they will argue that we're a business and actually we can sort of dictate the terms and conditions of our own business because we are a business and we're in business to make money. That's the essence of the thing, and they generally tend to make quite a bit of money, obviously.
Sure.
But I suppose their argument would be, and you can tell me if this isn't the case, that we're a business and actually we can rightfully, like any business can say, well, we choose to do business with you or not. So what you're talking about is a situation where, again, bring clarity to this, I'm not right, but that the HRI or people are looking to lobby the government to step in and say, to put legislation in place where they don't get to have that sort of control.
Gambling is a colossal problem, and if you watch the Ashes the other night, every single ad was led by a gambling ad. And I remember reading recently of a guy who'd had serious gambling issues, and it's basically like being an alcoholic and you're always in the bar if you're watching TV and you're watching sport now. So it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. I've reservations about that, and I've massive reservations about a bookmaker bringing a guy who clearly has a problem to places like, Old Trafford, bringing them on all these junkets, laying hundreds of thousands of euro to a guy, and not laying a guy who's betting completely honestly and is doing nothing untoward, who's having his 50 quid each way, and within a week of opening an account, he's closed down. You can't have it both ways. These bookmakers...
Closed down because he's making too much money.
Because he's not even making much money, but they just think they can't get an edge off him. And I would argue that they can use the intelligent punter to actually say, well, if he's consistently backing winners, okay, if he wants to back 50 quid at 8-1, we can cut that horse into 6-1, and it's actually going to save us money. They don't need to be afraid of laying bets, but I would certainly think there needs to be some legislation to stop what's going on, because at the moment, there are so many friends of mine who just cannot get bets on, and it's infuriating.
So on that point, do we have, I think I might know the answer to this, but do we have any numbers of idea of the scale of this thing?
Yeah, so Paddy Power says 99.99% of people are fine today. I think that's an exaggeration now. I think it's not quite as high as that. I think 2 or 3% of punters make money, but they should be accommodated. Bet365 are making their turnover is something like 2 billion last year. 3/4 of their bets are in play. Now that means it's a live event. That is dictated by models, and I'm not talking about like the girls in the magazines. I'm talking about models that basically mean you don't have to have human intervention. If Liverpool are playing tomorrow, they will know at all times what the odds should be for the next corner, what the score should be at half-time, next goal score, full-time.
So it's a very profitable thing.
Very profitable. Yeah. And in a wider sense here, it's part of the global shift towards computers and machines, and where would humans actually fit in the scheme of things in the long term? And bookmakers now are like that, and this goes to the odds compilers as well that price up horse races. They are giving them less and less kind of of a role and less relevance, because they don't really want to have an opinion. They just want to have as few people as possible and as many models as possible doing their job. And basically, so it's a true capitalist mindset. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm very worried about where racing is going, because there doesn't seem to be an opinion from bookmakers anymore. It's like one bookmaker will price up a race, everyone will follow, and if one of them is wrong, it's the blind leading the blind. And I've been accused by one bookmaker of backing horses that are always live, in other words, that they've been laid out for something. I'm only backing them because their price is wrong, and their price is wrong because their odds compilers are not doing their job. And as a punter I'm a very honest punter, in fairness, and I don't really bet on information. I bet on form. I find that infuriating. I'm just trying to bet and I'm trying to promote the sport, and I won't promote the sport indefinitely if bookmakers are going to just purge accounts willy-nilly. Yeah, and racing is the biggest, in terms of the gambling industry in Ireland, it's far and away the biggest area that people gamble on as well, obviously. It's changing though, Adrian, racing's becoming a smaller part of the cake, and when back in the day when you went into the dingy bookie shop, full of smoke, everyone was betting on horse racing, and betting on sport was a small thing, but like people now wake up in the middle of the night and bet on their phone, and they can bet live and running on some game in Dubai or whatever. Racing is definitely becoming smaller, but at the same time, like, the amount of people I know who I never thought had any interest in racing, who love betting on racing as well. And this is part of the overall narrative. Betting is just becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, and I should definitely think it should be policed. Yeah, well, I mean, and numbers from a report that I read, about 40,000 Irish people who have gambling issues, and that isn't what you're talking about, but I mean in that context too, in terms of the advertising. That is the real story. You look at Davy Glennon, the Galway hurler, you look at Oisin McConville, Niall McNamee, and these are just three names. Most of the people won't admit it, and people who have a gambling problem, if you're down €5,000, you know, 10,000 means no more really. It's the same thing, because your body has you've lost control, completely lost control. And gambling is a massive, massive issue. And because online doesn't require the actual interchange of hard cash, it's just a figure at the end of the screen.
Monopoly money.
Monopoly money. And you know the old famous story about the wife told the husband to go to the shop to get bread. He came back, he lost all their money, and he never got the bread. That rings true.
All right, well, you can read much more of that story on from Johnny's piece there on the back page of the Times Ireland edition. The Irish Independent this morning, it's rugby all the way here as well. On the actual back page, there's an ad for Black Friday. So this is the first page of Sports News. Pumas can be tamed by dominant hits and quick ball. Writes Rory O'Connor here ahead of this test. Conte's constant moaning over congested fixture list can't hide the fact that he steadied the ship at Chelsea. So positive analysis there from Luke Brown, who writes about the Chelsea manager.
Nice bit from Cian Tracy as well in the paper. I think it's the next page in, where he talks about the air miles. You're going to Black Friday there on the drone.
I know, yeah. So 186,000 kilometres.
It's actually like, how do you get your head around that? Like, so their carbon footprint is certainly quite high. You know? But such as
about the environment.
Yeah.
The Irish Daily Mail, meanwhile, the back page here, Joe goes green, Ireland coach, as in like youthful green as opposed to, Ireland coach puts faith in new faces for Argentina test, writes Liam Higney there on the back page of the Irish Daily Mail. Another blue day for Rooney and co. We spoke a little bit about that there. Everton won, Atalanta 5. Writes Dominic King there at Goodison Park last night in the Europa League. Cyril Donnellan hangs up his hurl as well. You can read a bit more about that inside. Cyril Donnellan, who it turns out Johnny Ward you went to school with.
Yeah, I went to a school where sport was certainly not high in the priority, and I think in terms of education was more of the technical variety, in the sense that it was the tech, and a lot of people will know like what a tech is compared to like the posh school that. So I ended up going there, and the reason I went there was because they had a soccer team and the other school, which had all my mates, didn't. But my only memory of hurling in the tech was we were playing against Ballinasloe, and one lad from Ballinasloe mid-game had a hurl in one hand and a fag in the other. And the pitch was...
So hurling stronghold of Ballinasloe as well.
I was from Mount Bellew, yeah, and he was from Ballinasloe, the hurling stronghold of Ballinasloe, and the pitch was more like being ready for cut for silage than for hurling. But Cyril came in, and he suffered extreme tragedy early in his life, because I was in school, and within 2 weeks Cyril's brother Robert was in my class, and my class was only, I think we had about 20 people in it, but we were literally there 2 weeks, and his grandmother and his mother died in a car crash. So Cyril would have been 9 maybe, and you can just imagine how hard that was for him. But Cyril would hurl for Pearses, which is a small club, probably quite north in terms of South East Galway, because hurling is a South East Galway pocket. But he was a late developer, but very physically imposing, and he had a really good career for Galway. And you know, I might slag him a bit that he probably waited for that medal and the trip away, but he did hang on in the panel. He got
to Boston, and then he decided that actually I've had enough now.
Sure, and I suppose the wider narrative, Adrian, is it's very hard for a 32-year-old hurler to play inter-county.
That was we were talking like 32, and he's out of the game. There's one sort of killer line, I think it was in that piece about Cyril Donnellan, that it said, because he didn't really play very much this season. He was a squad member, and obviously there had been a lot of players left out, but the line says that Donnellan, who survived the cull of players early in the year, which is means he was sort of on the line there a little bit, which is fair enough.
I think it does emphasise how insanely good hurling is as a sport at the moment. You know, when you look at Buffon, obviously that emotional scene last week where Italy didn't make the World Cup, and how his longevity and all that. Hurling at the moment, because it's so physical, the players are so, like, they're built like rugby players, you know, it's played at such immense speed, and defenders are forwards, forwards are defenders. Unless you're genuinely unique, like, you know, maybe a brick or, you know, it's very, very difficult to sustain it. And then not only that, but you're sacrificing your life to achieve it. Yeah,
the selfishness that we talked about with Rog a bit earlier on. The front page of the sport section of the Herald here, the heat is on. Eamon Carr writes about the sideline battle as Conte and Klopp prepare to get into it at Anfield. More of that with Nathan and Kevin very shortly. The back page of the Irish Daily Star, as Zlat will do nicely. Pretty good headline there. Ibrahimovic out to end his wait to land the Champions League. Now, it is a sort of a fairly random story of a Friday morning about Manchester United, but an interesting one for Derek Foley up here, saying that the All Blacks have secured a revenge game against Ireland next November in Dublin. So there had been talk about them, writes Derek Foley, meeting in Holland at some point, but the RFU wouldn't have been earning enough out of that. It would have been an expenses only game. So the All Blacks are out for revenge, and they're coming to Dublin outside, it seems, of the Guinness November Series, even potentially. That's
revenge for like what have we beaten, like once or something?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it's the last time, so it's, you know, the All Blacks don't need much to fire them up. Exactly. The Irish Mirror back page here again. Moyes goes Carol stinging. I'm having that. I'm enjoying that headline.
Johnny, play on Carol singing.
That's what we're having.
We're getting into
that time of the year.
Into
Black
Christmas,
Friday.
you know, we had the lights were on the other day, you know, on Grafton Street.
I'm sure you were down there.
8 this time of year.
Yeah. So yeah, David Moyes had a bit of a rant at Andy Carroll after the 2-0 loss at Watford on Sunday. So it's his first home game in charge of West Ham for David Moyes tonight. They take on Leicester.
This one you weren't sure of, no? Black Friday.
This one I'm really not sure of it, and if you can bring any clarity to it, please do get in contact with us, because I mean, I understand that it's Black Friday as in the day of the week. I don't understand the Black Friday part of this, but anyway, there we go. 2 rants for the price of 1. I mean,
and the Eau de Cologne, Kevin Coughlin,
Eau de Cologne is excellent.
Works for this paper. I'm not sure you know the way
credit
the subs work, the late shifts. He might not be awake.
Credit where it's due. Eau de
Cologne is beautiful.
Up and Adam as well. Adam Byrne making his Ireland debut in the wing against Argentina tomorrow. But just a couple of stories there about David Moyes giving the hairdryer treatment to his players at West Ham, and Pochettino not that worried if Danny Rose was a bit upset about being substituted. So that's fairly consistent with what we think we know about Maurizio Pochettino. But the Black Friday aspect of that, do get in contact. The Racing Post this morning, the British Horse Racing Authority under fire for plans to amend the rules over anti-doping. That's an interesting story that we're going to hear from Johnny, I think, a bit more about shortly as well. That's the Racing Post. And in The Guardian this morning, Vince Relish's timely riposte to Hayden Jibe. That's all to do with the Ashes, the Gabatoire and all that sort of stuff there. So we've more papers to get to, which we are going to do very shortly. Keep your comments coming in. It's 22 minutes past 8 on this Friday morning. Delighted to have you with us. Do keep your comments coming in. We've lots of stuff on the football and on our previous conversation about the state of the gambling industry in Ireland as well, all of which we'll come to very shortly. But before all of that, we're going to hear in just a few moments from Nathan Murphy and from Kevin Kilbane, who are standing by and are going to join us in studio. But before all of that, John Giles was on the show last night, as he is every Thursday night on Off the Ball. He was speaking to Nathan and Kevin, and here's a bit of flavour of what he had to say.
Wanted to talk to you about Umar Niasse, the Everton forward, who has become the first player to be banned after a game for diving, a 2-match ban. It did seem as though there was some contact. Are you in favour of this sort of look back 2 days later by a 3-man panel?
Yeah, I'd be totally in favour of it, Nathan. I mean, people keep going. I tell you, when they're really found out diving and they was really proven that they're diving, I think the manager of the team should also be penalised in some way. The managers of the team over the years are mostly responsible for this. You go back to, I remember years ago when Wenger, I think it was Perez playing. I'll never forget it. I think he was playing against Porto. It was a good few years ago. Most outrageous dive you've ever seen in your life. Wenger was asked that. Oh, I didn't see that. Or, well, we had one given against us last week. That's what Ferguson used to always say. They never answered the question, did he dive there? Right? Now, I think if you held the managers responsible in some way, then they would, like this suspension.
But did he 100% dive?
Which
Niasse, the player who was banned?
I wasn't sure at this particular incident, but I think this should be looked at. Now, I'm not saying this was the right decision or not, but there's lots of decisions which would be obvious that they did dive. There's no doubt. And the other thing they've got to, and they tried it for a while, the pulling and shoving from the corner kicks, right? Now, the referees allowed them to get away with that for years, and it became part of the game, right? And if they really, really put their foot down and stopped that, the managers would say, whatever you do, don't go grabbing them, because you're going to give a penalty away and you're going to be sent off, right? So that's it. Now, the diving, all the managers, I've never seen a manager yet condemn diving. Say, well, that happened to us last week, and the referee is there to see it, and
what goes around comes around.
All those excuses, and the following week they go mad if there's a penalty given against them. So I would encourage the technology to do it, right? If there's any doubt, I'd say if there's any doubt, like this one particular there, I would be inclined to let it go. But certainly do the ones that are really, really obvious. So there's no controversy about it afterwards.
All right, John Giles there from last night's Off the Ball. You can check out that full podcast at offtheball.com. Some good stuff, as always, from John. I'm delighted to say that we are going to stay with the football and that we're joined in studio by a particularly dynamic duo at this time of the morning for the very first time. Kevin Kilbane, welcome to the studio.
Oh, I'm delighted. It doesn't get any better than this, any bigger. It's just...
Nathan Murphy, good morning to you.
Stuff.
Good morning. I haven't been home since talking to John Giles, hence why I'm wearing the same clothes.
Yeah, well, it's all for the effort. Kevin Kilbane debut.
Yeah, that's my phone ringing.
Yeah, I mean, normally what happens in studio, Kev, is now you won't have any appreciation of this dynamic, but normally what happens in a visual studio is that you put your phone away.
Yeah.
When you're on Match of the Day 2 now on Sunday night, are you going to throw the phone down in front of yourself and Alan Shearer?
Give me a break for 5 minutes. You know, it's my first time. I'm a bit nervous.
It's his debut.
I'm a little bit nervous.
Come on. I mean, he's a history of bad debuts. Let's try and make this a bit of a sort of good experience.
Cutting.
Yeah. See, there you go.
Taking off at half time.
Lots of good stuff. We'll leave him in for the full slot, I think, no matter what happens, unless he gets his phone out again. Lots of good stuff to come for you over the next while. We've got an interesting line of topics and kind of a new format that we're going to sample that you'll definitely never seen before on those topics that we're going to get through. But there was one item that we wanted to get into that popped up on Monday night's show, and there was a bit of controversy about it. A lot of high-profile people in contact, including John Hartson here. Kevin Kilbane's jumper was essentially a bit of an outrage. He was called up on it while he was around the office during Monday afternoon, and I was just delighted to see, Kev, that players of the calibre, the punditry calibre of the likes of John Hartson, like, who really just calls it like it is, was willing to get involved. You've seen a very quick shot
of a real football man like John Hartson.
The offending.
No, I would say there was actually only one person that called me up on it in the office, and that was you, Adrian.
Right,
you were the only one, with that shirt as well. But anyway, but no, I was quite happy.
I mean, look at the state of it. Let's face it. What happened to the stripes around the top? Did they just get bored?
I was quite happy. Honestly, I think that looks pretty cool. I would say, I think I said it the night, I'd left it in the back of the wardrobe. Hadn't seen it for a long time.
Since the 70s.
Perhaps some might say it should have stayed in the wardrobe, but I just saw it. I'd only wore it a couple of times, and
it'll hardly see too much more action, I would think.
It will be. It'll be back out again.
No, like, you're critical at times of people's haircuts and saying that they're probably should really be in their.
We can see here also the sort of tip of the cap to the sponsor here as well, just in case anybody.
Was it a freebie from Farah Menswear?
No, honest to God, no, not at all, not at all. I thought I'd copy them in, give them.
You were taking the piss out of it. That jumper that you put in your tweet there was better than the jumper you were wearing.
Was it really?
Honestly, even complete with the cap.
That jumper would have been fine on one of the 22-year-old hipsters that work around the office. On the 40-something-year-old Kevin Kilbane.
I'm still 40 now. I'm not 40-something just yet. I'm quite happy with my style.
It's too early for this fashion tips with Kevin Kilbane and Nathan Murphy.
Hey, can I say something as well, right? So you've had Kenny Cunningham in for the last 2 mornings in the studio with hoodies on, and you're calling me up for a jumper.
He's working to his style. That's Kev's. That's.
He is one step away from wearing his pyjamas.
Yeah. Honestly.
Right, here's a bit of a flavour of what's coming up over the next 10, 12 minutes or thereabouts. We're going to get into some of these topics. Les Moreno. Yeah, that's early in the morning, all right. Hazard lights on. We're going to talk about Paul Pogba. The Gunners, are they on fire? And Ireland, what's the story? We're going to wring as much out of that Ireland story as we possibly can, but we want to start on Alberto Moreno, lads, because he's been the big story really this week. And, he messed up, right? I think he's put his own hands up on that front.
Yeah.
He's playing against his former club. Maybe there's a bit of a pressure on. Is it from a Liverpool point of view at this stage, is it a break-up situation here, or does Klopp continue to give him more chances?
Well, he will give him more chances. He's clearly shown that one. He did an interview. I know anyone saw the interview he did with Sid Lowe in The Guardian last week, and he was basically saying, look, I've changed my game. I'm thinking more defensive now. I've actually got that in my head. Playing alongside Clav and Lovren has certainly helped me. That they're actually giving me a bit of advice on when to bomb forward. He said, in my head, all I had was attack. But if you look at the 2 goals, obviously the penalty that you can see, he's a bit harsh to really criticise me. He's just a bit slow on that one, fair enough. But for the first goal, Liverpool are cruising 3-0 going on 5-0 by half time. It really was. Liverpool were just so dominant. And then he gives Sevilla way back into it. obviously shoves the lad over, then he gets caught out on the actual corner, a free kick that comes in from that.
On that point, is it that a lapse in concentration? Because I think that's maybe what you're saying, as opposed to him just being a bad player.
Yeah, it's a total lapse in concentration, but he has these spells in him. It's totally there with him. Mark Lawrenson was on Off the Ball through the week, and he was talking about Liverpool when they're bad. They're seriously bad from a defensive point of view, and that second half performance, more so from Moreno, given the fact is that we were talking, remember we was on with Owen last week, and Owen was trying to fight the case or make the case, say, well, he's been great this season. Yeah, he's been better, but you always know that this sort of mistake will be in him, don't you?
I'd love to know what happened with James Milner in pre-season with his stats that showed that there was something wrong, that he couldn't play that left-back position, because he was one of the best left-backs in the league now, and he's been totally ostracised.
I believe that he doesn't want to play there, though. That's the thing, don't he?
Well, he's not playing at all now. But that, what you say there about a lack of concentration, that's something you could say about the entire Liverpool defence, because the stats do say that by and large they're very solid. They don't concede many goals in most games. Conceded one game at home all season in the league. I think they've 12 clean sheets in the last 18 games, better than anybody in that period of time in the Premier League. But when it goes wrong, the second they concede one, they always look like conceding a second goal.
The point that he makes is quite good on him, on the back four in general. Moreno's even touched on it himself. I think he just needs guidance on the pitch. I think he needs someone actually to tell him, no, you don't go. No, you sit. You've got to see certain spells through. Because sometimes, even this season, when you watch him, he just runs forward aimlessly when Liverpool are exposed. There's no need for him at times to do it, particularly when Liverpool are in a dominant position.
Nathan, that chicken there behind you, will you just fire that over to me? There was a format here that I sort of really failed to outline at the top of the piece, that we've got 2 minutes on each of these topics.
Never mind all that. Jordan Henderson is the big problem
after the end of the 2 minutes. We're going to hear a bit of that. Just very briefly, does he start? He sounds like he does start against Chelsea.
Yeah, he started 17 games this season. I was looking at his stats and he did 17. I think he'll start, definitely,
Of course he starts. It was a nonsense conversation that he's going to drop him totally out of the squad, that it's his last game. He'll play.
Hazard lights on was the second topic that we have up for discussion here. He's a goal and assist again during the week. There's a lot of links for this guy leaving. He's kind of said that maybe I will, and kind of said that maybe I won't. Really difficult to read sort of the quotes, but he's central to whatever's good about Chelsea.
Well, it looks as though there's serious interest in Real Madrid. I think Chelsea have indicated they want to make him the best or the highest paid player in the Premier League. He's started to come good. I think it's 6 goals now in his last 7 games. He's really started to kick up a notch or two now. Particularly in the last few weeks, he started to get a good understanding with Morata as well. That injury at the start of the season probably hindered him when he first came back to fitness. But at the moment, given his goal again midweek in the Champions League, given the form that he's in, I just think he's going to get better and better, and that relationship with Morata will continue to grow,
He's probably been surpassed a little bit this season by De Bruyne because of the injury that Hazard suffered in pre-season. But he's been in the team of the season for the last 5 years. If he gets to his best, he's probably the best player in the league. And I do think Chelsea, they've won their last 4 in the league. If they can get everybody fit, could go on a run. Now, catching Manchester City is probably out of the question, but certainly best of the rest. One thing to look at with Hazard, he's 26. He's played 540 senior games. He's only 26. Between Lille, between Belgium, between Chelsea, it's an incredible amount of football. You do wonder if he's going to have that similar arc to maybe Rooney.
I just make one point though on it, because being 26.
Chicken has spoken, but go for
27 though in January. Is it now or never? Does he leave to go to Real Madrid now? Because if he doesn't and he signs a new deal, he's 30, he won't. Then he's missed his chance to go to Real Madrid.
It looked good, just very briefly again, alongside Willian obviously on Wednesday night. Is that the combination that continues against Liverpool, or does Morata come back in?
I like Willian. I really like.
Well, Morata plays as well. I wouldn't be surprised if we went with the 3 of them.
Overdue on that one. Paul Pogba, we want to talk about. He got a bit of stick when he came back. Obviously, he wasn't sure about what his position was, or certainly we weren't sure what his position was, and he's really settled into that team. He's back from injury, been out for a period of time, certainly been missing for a period of time. So what's his importance to United at the minute? Is he the most important United player right now?
Well, yes, I think he would be. He was excellent on his return last week. I was at the game against Newcastle. The goal and the assist, yes, brilliant. Look at the desire and the energy they showed in getting his goal at the weekend. Listening to Kenny, who was on OTBAM this week as well, talking about him in the aftermath of the Basel game. Man United lost a bit of the rhythm when he went off the pitch, and given that they were in a decent position, Kenny was watching the game, he was commentating the game, I think. He was basically saying Man United, got that right again, he was saying they were so dominant, and all of a sudden he went off the pitch and it just kind of knocked them a little bit. You certainly saw that last week when he come back into the Newcastle game. He brings that unpredictability that United need. He's got a great relationship alongside Matic. I think he's the key player at the moment for them, yes.
He brings the best out of everybody else in that team. You look at Mkhitaryan's form this season. When Pogba was fit, Mkhitaryan was playing brilliantly. You look at Lukaku, the way he started the season, they all seem to look to Pogba to create, to be this instigator of every move, and they're probably over-reliant on him already, that when he's not on the pitch, nobody else in midfield really wants to take control. It's not Matic's game, it's certainly not Ander Herrera's game, so that is a bit of an issue that you would think for a team like Manchester United, if they want to go win the Champions League, you can't be that reliant on one player.
Arsenal, we want to talk about the Gunners. Gunners on fire, Kev, was the really catchy headline that we had up here at the top of the piece. 12 points back from the Premier League lead. When you look at them over the last few seasons, I think it's 5th, 2nd, 3rd in order of the last few seasons, currently 6th. Like, we're very excited because they beat Spurs last weekend, but I mean, I don't know what the true level of Arsenal actually is.
I think that is the problem with us. I mean, I'm not too sure who thought of those headlines regarding our topics there, but anyway, we'll talk about that later. Last week I saw an Arsenal side that I haven't seen in a number of years, with and without the ball. They were always good without the ball. And if you look at the stats in general across the game against Tottenham, they were quite even. Arsenal didn't have as much possession. I think they had about 42% possession, but overall, shots, everything else was pretty much even, I think, throughout. But to the naked eye, when you're watching that game, you've seen a different Arsenal team. Without the ball, they were just superb. The way that they closed down Tottenham, the way they got in the face. I've not seen it from an Arsenal side in such a long time. That is the level they're at now. Can they maintain that, or do we see an Arsenal side go to Burnley at the weekend and struggle? They've won 12 at home now.
And nobody would be in the slightest bit surprised if they capitulated.
No, their away form all year in 2017 has been horrible, and I think it's a sign of how bad they've been against the top teams, that people have probably lost the run of themselves. That performance against Spurs should be the standard every week. Now, they were better against Manchester City as well. They were set up better. They seem to have a more solid structure over the last few weeks. But it's still only about 2 weeks since they lost to Manchester City. It's only a couple of weeks further back since they lost to Watford. I would be wary of getting carried away. And what are Arsenal going to do this season anyways? They're not going to win the league. Maybe they win the Europa League.
It's second,
Sanchez and
but if Sanchez and Olsen are going to lead, that's an amazing success for them.
Well, they're not going to finish second.
To get back into the top 4 for Arsenal has to be a success this season, given what happened, because I thought they'd fall away this year.
We sort of ran out of time on that one, so the chicken is just going to do its thing there at the end regardless. We do want to wrap up with Ireland. What's the story? It's our last talking point here. 2 minutes to talk about Ireland. What's the story?
Are we not beyond it now? Are we not had enough on it now?
No, I think we can. So the story this week, Brian Kerr's on TV3 and Tommy asks him about if you were to go back in. And Brian obviously is in a, as he said himself, a bit of an awkward position, because I think on the face of it, everybody would sort of accept that Brian, of course, there isn't any reason why he wouldn't want to be back involved with the thing. There was talk about himself and Stephen Kenny being involved in some level. Like, it would seem to make a bit of sense. Do we need to, because we spoke a bit about in last Friday's show about maybe Liam Brady coming back into the thing. Is there that sort of a root branch structural requirement required with Ireland right now to try and develop this thing?
It's where Nathan and I were talking about this last night. I think in general, it's where do we put him? Where does Brian fit in within the structure?
It's a development. It's an underage. It's a bigger picture, isn't it?
Personally, I cannot believe that he's not involved, Brian Kerr, at some level within the FAI, at some development level, even at senior level, whatever it would be. Brian Kerr is the most knowledgeable man in this country, in my opinion. I think his knowledge from the very top to the very bottom. There's no one better than him. There is no one better than him. I think he deals with people on a personal level. I think even Joel touched on it this week as well, in relation to Eamon Dunphy. He was another one that came out and spoke so glowingly of him to be involved, him and Stephen Kenny. Of course, Liam Brady came out and said that Brian Kerr should be involved at some level. I'm in total agreement with that. We've got a man with so much knowledge, and we're not utilising that knowledge. We're not using him. Given what he's achieved, what he's done with underage players, and we don't have a man of his calibre involved, I think it is wrong that we don't have him involved.
It's hard to see where he gets involved, though. Even if they did decide to settle all their differences, Brian doesn't want an ambassadorial role, I'm sure.
No.
He wants responsibility and he wants power. So putting him in with Stephen Kenny, does he go in as some sort of a father figure with Stephen Kenny taking charge? Would he be happy with that? Would he be happy just sitting in the background as Kenny goes and takes all the press conferences, takes all the responsibility? I'm not sure, but I'm with Kev. They need to get him involved.
Just one last point. I think you have to make this as well. Brian isn't the one that's driving this debate as well.
It's not.
I think he's supposed to. And you know what? He's a great man, and you know what I think of him anyway. But I think in general he's not the one that needs to be driving this debate. It's got to come from other people that says, look, we've got such an experienced man, he should be involved.
I think we're going to have more conversation on this next week as well, by the way. But Jim McGuinness been touted as a guy who could be heavily involved here somewhere along the line.
Great.
I mean, he's not a football man, Kev.
My issue, my issue that I had, and I spoke about this early on this year regarding it, where he's all of a sudden taking up a coaching position. My point being, yes, if Jim McGuinness was to get involved at senior international level in some capacity, great. He certainly can't be head coach. Certainly not for the next 10 years, in my opinion. Certainly even not an assistant manager's level over the next 5 or 6 years.
When you say head coach, not manager, is what you're saying?
Yeah, not manager. Yeah. Simply because if I'm looking at somebody who's, say John Caulfield, for instance, and I used him as an example when I was referencing this as well. John Caulfield has managed and he's coached teams at virtually every level. He's made his way up through the game. Stephen Kenny's another one, for instance, who's coached a team over a certain amount of time, actually taken a side. Now, it's all right saying you're coaching a side. Jim McGuinness has coached individual GAA sides. He's done an unbelievable job with Donegal, and that's the thing. He has been great, and I think he's great for the mental preparation of a side. I don't see any reason why we can't utilise his strength in coming in with us. But you can't turn around to me and say that he's going to go in and be the head man, because he's never taken a team. He's never taken a team.
Could be a coach
at any level. Well, he's not coached a team at any level. Or
I don't know. I don't know that actually.
Well, okay. Well, I don't know that myself in general, but from what I'm led to believe, even at Celtic, he didn't take a team on his own, taking a team 1 to 11 on the pitch day in, day out. That is where you're going to learn, and you're going to realise your strengths and your weaknesses. That is where that's where he's got to do it.
Because I think it does seem as if he's on a path, he himself, a sort of self-stated path.
Yeah, but I'm talking, even if it's under 12s, under 13 level, that is where all our coaches at every level, and even our top man, Martin O'Neill, he was coaching at non-league football over in England before he's made the pathway to Wickham, then obviously on to Leicester and Celtic and the job that he's done. That is the pathway that it takes. He's not been on that pathway, so it's going to take 10 or 15 years before he could get to that top job.
Briefly, because I'm going to get my head taken off.
I was just not having a conversation that Jim McGuinness himself would probably say, lads, nothing to do with me. I'm not linking myself with these jobs. I understand I am on a path, much like Ron O'Gara in rugby, that in 7 or 8 years, I hope to have got an assistant manager's gig back in Europe and maybe progress, take a job, and then. But I don't think you can have any criticism honestly, for the way he's gone about things.
I think I was probably misinterpreted about what I think about it. But what I would say is, I think there could be a role for him to play. I think he could play a pivotal role.
Do you think if he went on a path, he could ever become the Republic of Ireland manager?
If he was taking a team over a certain amount of time and he got to, the one thing I took exception when he spoke about, I'm 60-70% way in my head how my team's going to line up. Now, that says to me that, look, you're a long way off it then if that's the case. If you're saying that, I think that you've got to take certain steps, and it's almost baby steps at first. And if I look at the coach of it, like, you've got Brian Kerr. We've already spoke about Brian Kerr. Brian Kerr is the most knowledgeable man on the game over here that I've known from top to bottom. I doubt very much that Jim McGuinness, and I would probably know that, he couldn't live with Brian for his knowledge on the game over here, the actual soccer terms. He couldn't live with him. Yeah. All
right, we'll see how that develops over the next while. Lads, it's been a pleasure having you in, and you both dressed pretty well, so thanks a million for making the effort. There's a quick recap on the topics that we had, and a recap on the games as well on Premier League Live this weekend. Manchester United against Brighton, that's going to be Ian Beach, and that man Brian Kerr that Kev has been talking about there, and we're going to have reporters around all the games as well. And then over and off the ball on Sunday, Brian's back in action, a busy man for us this weekend. He is alongside one Nathaniel Murphy for that Burnley Arsenal game, which kicks off at 2 o'clock, and then it's over to Dave and Pat Nevin, who are going to take in Huddersfield against Manchester City. Alright, we're going to be back with Johnny Ward after these.
The issue with the Brian conversation and the Lee Carsley conversation and the working towards getting somebody who knows the run-ins in terms of underage football and structures and all of that is part of a wider conversation that I think Conor Neville touched on. He wrote a great article today just talking about the general culture about surrounding the Irish team, which is basically, it's almost like a payday situation, like living from payday to payday, which is living from tournament to tournament. The goal, no matter what, is to get to the Euros, get to the World Cup. The means, and we saw it, and we listened, like even Joe sitting there in that seat before both legs of the Denmark game, saying he now doesn't care that the style of play isn't actually that expansive or progressive or whatever way you want to call it. It's about getting the results, and so far up until that point the Irish team have been getting the results to justify suffering through or putting up with the style of play. There will be no change in terms of culture, and with the greatest respect to the work the Root Doctor is doing, and others around him as well, there will be no change in the culture until the basis of the team is actually progress the senior team as well. The senior team are a separate baby that are used to furnish debts for the FAI by getting to tournaments. One of the first stories we saw coming out of Ireland not qualifying was that such and such 8 million won't be given to the FAI now because we haven't qualified, and obviously there's going to be a knock-on effect to the underage setups as well because of that. The basic premise is money. The senior team are going to fund everything. The senior team will only fund everything if they're put in a position to continually fund everything, not to maybe scrape over the line every 2 years, as is currently the case.
But what's the alternative?
Well, basically having to play the long game, having to suffer the fact that maybe through the blooding of younger players or the development of a football culture within the country, that we might actually miss out.
I don't think anyone would find that acceptable. I don't think even if Brian Kerr came back, that.
Brian Kerr wrote a great piece in the end of the week. Brilliant piece. It was well written. It was, the way he put his points across as well was excellent. And you just maybe going back to your original point on someone like Jim McGuinness, I think there could be a role for him within the structure. Certainly not as manager or regards day-to-day stuff. Certainly from the motivation side of it. Certainly from maybe the mental, the preparation side of the players. I would have no issue with that. But there are a number of candidates that will be way ahead of him for assistant roles, for coaching roles, for the top role. A number, you mentioned Lee Carr's there. Brian Kerr would be another one that's top of my head there as well. And people that have coached over the water, Curtis Fleming, Graham Kavanagh, Gary Breen, all these sort of players. Kenny Cunningham would be another as well. Damien Duffy's over here now, albeit they've not coached at the senior level as yet. But these names would certainly be. And then you're looking at the Stephen Kennys, the John Caulfield as well, way ahead of that level.
Yeah, good stuff from Kevin Kilbane, Nathan Murphy and Richie McCormack on last night's Off the Ball. You can check out more of that good stuff on offtheball.com. The Chicken is still alongside us. Get your thoughts in on any of those topics which you have been doing. Get your thoughts into us, hashtag OTBAM, or you can get us on the Facebook page or leave a YouTube comment, or really whatever you're having yourself. It is that time of the week at just gone 8:45, which I'm sure you've all been waiting for all week. It's the BarryOmeter. So it's pick through what's been hot and what's not so hot this week, really, and whatever's kind of coming off the top of my head really is the essence of this piece. In at number 5, so we go in reverse order, that's the way it works. And in at number 5 this week are the England rugby players who this week decided that they wouldn't be sharing their match bonus with their Samoan counterparts. This was the story that really interested me. Samoa Union saying that they are a bankrupt organisation. World Rugby saying, well, maybe you're not so bankrupt. They dispute that. The Samoan players aren't going to get to be paid for this one. To be fair to the England players, I mean, they only get the 22 grand per game. So, I mean, maybe it's fair enough that they didn't want to share any of that loot with their Samoan counterparts, and they were denied their 3.5 million bonus that they would have won in the Grand Slam if they had done a Grand Slam in the Six Nations this year, denied that by a final day defeat by Ireland. So maybe it's fair enough that these England players don't want to split some of that cash, or maybe not. In at number 4 this week is Conor McGregor, who was called before the courts in Blanchardstown during the week to answer a charge of speeding, was our Conor McGregor, but he didn't show. He sent his business manager instead, who you've seen here leaving the court yesterday. Second time McGregor himself was a no-show. Judge Miriam Walsh, and fair play to her, said that McGregor himself would have to come back next week if he wants to argue it. In his defence, we had heard that he was outside his Killiney home shining the spirit of ecstasy on his new bonnet of his Rolls Royce when he spotted the referee Mark Goddard running a red light, hopped into his car and sped after him to make a citizen's arrest. That may or may not be true. In at number 3 this week is the Wigan winger Ryan Colclough, who was playing for Wigan on Tuesday night against Doncaster, who managed to score a couple of goals before getting the information that his wife would get into labour and had to get the hell out of there. So he sped down the M6 to Warrington Hospital, which is a half an hour spin from the DW. You can see him here in his full kit. That's a full 30 minutes after he left the game. He could have changed his gear. I don't know if he can fully make it out there, but he's still wearing his shin pads, for God's sake. Ryan Colclough, I mean, it's admirable that you got the hell out of there to do the right thing, but I mean, I think you had time maybe to change out of your gear before you got to the hospital. That was number 3. In at number 2 this week is a great week for Stephen Kenny, the Dundalk manager, who's been recommended into, as you've been hearing, the Republic of Ireland job by none other than the most high profile and credible voice in Irish football, by Eamon Dunphy, who says that Stephen Kenny should be the next Republic of Ireland manager. Eamon says Stephen Kenny's the man for the job. Give him 5 years, says Eamon, all of which means that Stephen Kenny has around about, I believe, 6 months before Eamon calls for his head. And in at number 1 this week, Stephen Kenny's appointment would be bad news for a Derry manager, of course, in the form of Martin O'Neill, who we're not sure is staying on in that job just yet or not. But in at number one this week are two Derry footballers, two inspirations. First of all, Creasy McCaig, who joined us on OTBAM this week, being brilliant and wonderfully communicative and open with his beliefs. He was brilliant. And alongside him at number one is the Republic of Ireland footballer James McLean, who kick-started a national conversation about racism during the week when he called out those who were giving Cyrus Christie abuse. And James McLean, it turns out, has been a real role model to the youth of Ireland over the last couple of years. Has interesting stuff to say, and he knows how to say it. And for those reasons, it's James McLean and Creasy McCaig who are number one on the BarryOmeter this week. Let us know your thoughts on that. The Johnny Ward is still with us, by the way. The England rugby story was kind of an interesting one. They're getting 22 grand a game. They get pretty well remunerated for their efforts, the England rugby team, but they decided that the best port of call here was not to make some sort of reparation to the Samoan players who aren't going to get paid at all. It's kind of bizarre.
They were asked to give them £1,000, which is less than 5%, but on ethical grounds, which were what exactly?
I mean, I don't fully get it. One of the things that Dan Coles, who came out this week to speak about it, said that we don't want to set a precedent that if we were to do this, then every team will come looking for
Of course.
Yeah. I don't believe that would be the case. I think that what would happen, people would look at it in isolation and say, you know what, rightly or wrongly, because as I said, it's disputed that the Samoan Rugby Union are actually bankrupt, disputed by World Rugby. Rightly or wrongly, we're going to give you a few quid. I mean, I think it's bizarre. The other thing is that the Samoan players, we shouldn't look at them too poorly. Most of them ply their trade in England. It's a very wealthy club game in France, an even wealthier club game, and a lot of clubs in New Zealand as well. So they're not paupers, but at the same time, I think fair is fair.
It's only £1,000. I think they're getting 650 quid. The ethical stuff just doesn't wash with me at all now, I have to say.
I'm not having it, is the short story on that.
Do you worry about where sport is going, though, and you know, you get the likes of Jesse Lingard on $100,000 a week?
I think sport has gone years ago, drove over the cliff edge of any sort of reasonableness, or like when you talk about ethics in sport, I think it's long since driven over the cliff edge, I have to say.
Is it going to destroy itself? Like, I definitely see the Premier League destroying itself in the sense that I don't think it will have any real kind of relationship with the place it's supposed to represent anymore. In the sense that, you know, I suppose the clubs want like once per year visitors to buy merchandise and to commercialise the whole thing. You know, you have clubs now with little or no English players. They're on obscene money. What does Manchester City have to do with Manchester?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I mean, I heard somebody recently making the point that if you travel around the London Underground system, you see the ads that are targeting tourists in the shape of come to this West End musical, come to Les Miserables, etc. And the other thing you'll see is ads for London-based Premier League matches. So what you end up is with a large proportion of attendances at Premier League matches being tourists. And that is never going to make, apart from all those points you've made, it's never going to make for the most amazing atmosphere either when you've got somebody who's flown in from wherever. And I mean, more luck to them, you know, like I've done it myself. You go to London for the weekend, you go and check out a game, but you're not necessarily going to be getting behind the team in any fulsome way.
But, you know, and I was reading, I believe, Miracles, the story about the Nottingham Forest, Brian Clough era, and they were players that you could really relate to. They were basically mates of you know, the fans. I think that's why I suppose I saw Galway win the hurling this year for the first time in my lifetime. Realistically, it was so special because I went to school with Sir Donald, you know, or I knew another lad and this and that, like, and these lads are doing it for the love of the game. What can the normal guy in the minimum wage in Manchester, what's his relationship with Toure?
Yeah, maybe they actually just don't need that guy in Manchester, and I think that's what's becoming sort of, it's a culture shift for football everywhere if it happens. But I think
that's why McLean as well is so admirable.
Absolutely, he's of his people, and he was a guy who was pretty. Well, look, that's his choice. He was a guy who was labelled certainly in one way over the early parts of his career, but over the last couple of years has said a lot of fairly intelligent and well communicated points. Whether you agree with them or not is an entirely separate thing, but he's shown a capacity to be a very able communicator.
Sure, and Daniel MacDonald did a piece in The Independent last week where he visited, you know, where he's from, and this guy comes from proper working class Derry, and it painted a picture of where he'd come, and for him to actually stand for his beliefs, I think is completely admirable. And this week he only went up, in my estimation, further.
7 minutes to 9 on this Friday morning. You're welcome on into OTBAM. It's Adrian and Johnny Ward with you this morning. You've been in touch as well. Lots of good comments coming in. Our earlier conversation with Johnny about the state of the gambling industry in Ireland. Jack Anderson says, good debate on gambling it off the ball, but the Irish government is sitting on gambling control bill. We need a national gambling regulator, otherwise the industry will continue to police itself as it pleases. That from Jack Anderson. From @GAA Picks on Twitter, he says, well done, Johnny. Delighted that someone is discussing this as it's gone beyond a joke. The lens should be broadened to all sports, not just racing though. And Jimmy on Twitter, who I don't know if Jimmy enjoys a drink of a Friday morning, says that OTBAM is brilliant, simple, no nonsense.
I think he's high. He's high from Black Friday. He must have purchased his own.
He's obviously been watching the BarryOmeter, I think.
Yeah.
He was clearly commenting on that segment specifically. Right, that's Jimmy. A keeper comment set coming in. We're going to talk about the back pages in a little bit. The chicken is still with us as well. We might hear a bit more from him shortly. But before all that, we've been out and about this last couple of weeks. Shane Stapleton's been doing some brilliant stuff. You can check it all out on offtheball.com, including this week's chat with the GAA referee, David Gough.
Yeah, the black card rule is for me a fantastic rule within the game, but one of my pet hates in the way it's worded. So there's 5 specific rules within the black card. 2 of them are fine.
Which are?
With the 2 that relate to remonstrating in an aggressive manner with a referee. So that deals with a player's disposition and how he's acting around you. His language or his words are dealt with within yellow card and red card rules. But remonstration and the mannerisms are dealt with black card. To use provocative or provocative or abusive language or gestures to an opponent or a teammate is also a black card. But it's the 3 physical aspects of the black card rule that I have an issue with. So they're the deliberate body collides, the deliberate trips and the deliberate pull downs. How a referee, sometimes it's very clear cut, but how a referee can say if a foul is completely deliberate or not is as I've said before, asking us to play God, because we can't get into the mindset of a player. I understand why they have included the word, but I don't like it. And I see as well that the fouls as they are committed are not punishing the crimes. So what we have is cynical play happening all over the field, but what is happening as a result is a free and a player being substituted. Generally, cynical play happens in an attempt to stop a scoring attempt. The resultant penalty does not allow a scoring attempt for the opposition. And we had the situation at the end of the All-Ireland final this year. We had it with what brought in the black card rule with Colin Kavanagh and Conor McManus. And no scoring attempt or goal attempt was allowed to happen. So what I would like to see is for those rules to be changed, to get rid of the very prescriptive language in the black card rule for those fouls, because there can be cynical fouls happen on a field that might not fall into the language of those rules, that might not be trips or pull downs, but they're still every bit as cynical in their nature. So like our yellow card rule, which is any form of rough play, or our red card rule, which is any form of dangerous play, just to have one black card rule, any form of cynical play, and let it not be prescriptive to a certain type of tackle, and leave it up to the referee to decide if it's cynical or if it's not. And if it's cynical, substitute the player, but reward the team who've been fouled by giving them a penalty. And if we're serious about cutting out cynical play from our game, we need to reward the team with a scoring opportunity, because generally that's what the cynical foul has stopped.
Yeah, so I think first of all, Sean Kavanagh would be delighted that you said it was his brother Colin Kavanagh. But again, to come back to your point, because I think it's a very interesting one, and I actually do agree that if you do a cynical foul, it is in terms of trying to stop a score. So basically you should be punished on the scoreboard, or at least with an opportunity to do so. Do you think that, again, interpretation is always the issue here, that you as a referee, you're going to call it as you see it, you might give a penalty or a cynical foul for one reason and another referee won't. So again, it's down to the same problem of interpretation.
Well, the interpretation is there all the time. I mean, that is my job. I have judgment calls to make every single time I go out onto the field. Every referee does. Was that a foul? Was it not a foul? Was it a pick-up? Was it not? Did he overcarry? Did he throw the ball? Was that a fair shoulder? Was it not? They are judgment calls we make constantly. We could make 90 to 100 of those in a game easily. So it's no different than any other call we're going to have to make. But it just makes it that little bit easier for us, because we're not saying, I know it's cynical, but was it a trip? Was it a pull down? And I can give you an example of a player running through on goal and his jersey is held back. The player does not go to ground. He's awarded a free. He's not getting his scoring chance. The most you can give for that is a noting offence, not even a yellow card, because that's all it is in the language of the rules. To hold the opponent is a noting offence. I know the foul is every bit as cynical as a trip or deliberate pull down, because it stopped the scoring chance, but there's nothing I can do because of the prescriptive language and nature of our rules. So that if they left it up to our interpretation with just one rule, any form of cynical play, it would make it much easier for the referees in terms of deciding what is cynical fouling and what is not.
Fascinating stuff from David Gough in conversation with Shane Stapleton. He has plenty more to discuss as well, including what it's like to be an openly gay man in the GAA in 2017. And you can check out that full piece. It's on our YouTube channel, or just head over to offtheball.com, where you can check out that and much more of Shane Stapleton's very good work, it has to be said. That is David Gough. Let's just give you, coming up on 9 o'clock on this Friday morning, a brief flavour of what's happening across the back pages today. We discussed it in a bit more detail earlier on, so if you want to check that, just flick back on your feed. But the Irish Examiner have a very interesting story. It's Ronan O'Gara who writes for them every Friday, and this is some detail on his move to the Crusaders. He talks about how it all came about. Dan Carter sidles up to him in the gym and says, oh, maybe you'd like to coach in New Zealand, and he says, yeah, maybe I would. That's the kind of short story, and hence he's off. And by all accounts from that piece, one of the most interesting lines is that he's not coming back anytime soon. He says that he's going to spend a year in New Zealand. He might spend 2 years, and then after that himself and his wife have agreed that they'll be coming back to Paris so their kids can properly nail the French language. So that is Ronan O'Gara in the Examiner this morning. It's very worthwhile to check that out. The back page, front page of the Irish Times sports section, it's all rugby here. It's all in the lead into tomorrow's game between Ireland and Argentina. Jerry Thornley, Gavin Cummesky, and other good stuff there in the Irish Times this morning. It's rugby as well in the Irish Independent. Rory O'Connor, Pumas can be tamed by dominant hits and quick ball. I think we're all expecting an Ireland win at the Aviva Stadium tomorrow. We'll be there, by the way, in the Aviva fan studio in the company of Niamh Briggs, Andrew Trimble and Mike McCarthy to preview the game, to bring a half-time and full-time analysis as well, and giving you an opportunity to win tickets to come and join us for the Six Nations at the Aviva fan studio. So that's Ireland-Argentina tomorrow. Another blue day for Rooney and Co. Writes Dominic King here on the back page of the Irish Daily Mail. Joe goes green, as in youthful. Ireland coach puts faith in new faces for Argentina test. The Irish Sun this morning, Black Friday. Still haven't fully figured this one out, I'm not going to lie to you. 2 rants for the price of one. David Moyes and Maurizio Pochettino on the rant this morning there. Woe to Cologne, another good one there at the top. Arsenal beaten and up and Adam Byrne making his debut for Ireland at the Aviva tomorrow. The Irish Daily Mirror, Moyes goes Carl stinging. Johnny, we're loving that one.
I love the up and at him as well, invoking
up and
the
at
old Simpsons. Up and at them.
Up and at them.
Yeah.
New boss attacks Star Striker's attitude. Maybe that's exactly what Andy Carroll needs, is a bit of a rocket as he tries to spark his... I mean, he's been this guy who's obviously the 30 million player, whatever he was. It never really fully came to fruition.
Still potentially a
it's all about the potential.
Yeah, and it is. But players struggle to cope nowadays with players like Andy Carroll. They still do, you know, and he still has time. You know, I'd hate to mark him if I were a defender anyway. You know, but you know, you're now kind of coached to deal with players on the ground. You're not coached to deal with the likes of him, and he's still as good as there is at that type of game, I think. Andy
Carroll as the sort of big man up front, and Johnny Ward as the centre half is a sort of a contest I'd like to see. Well, we had Kenny Cunningham on, you know, this week. You know, he alluded to the fact that he wasn't the bigger centre half while wearing a hoodie. I have to say, I would call him on that. You've left the hoodie at home, and you've left the orange juice at home, and you've left the croissants at home. The croissants. The reason O'Gara is going back to France is clearly for croissants. They're good croissants. Creme de la menthe, as Del Boy would say. So that will do nicely, says Zlatan Ibrahimovic here. It's a story about Manchester United and Ibrahimovic. It turns out, writes Jeremy Cross, he wants to win the Champions League. Funnily enough. That's not going to happen based on the other night. He looked really rusty now. Well, Yeah, it might actually happen for United though.
It won't.
It's not particularly pretty football, but they're grinding out results.
Definitely not the answer up front. Lukaku. Not the answer. There's so many bad players in that
Lukaku
team.
or Ibrahimovic?
Well, Ibra's getting on. Lukaku's not the answer. He's nowhere near good enough.
Yeah. All Blacks to return next year. Good exclusive here from Derek Foley on the back page of the Star this morning. He says that they're coming back. It seems as if it's outside of the Guinness November series, but that Ireland are going to play the All Blacks again, who are, as Richie McCaw says, they're on a revenge mission, it turns out, to take on Ireland. Johnny Ward exclusive over here. It's all about the exclusive this morning. And Johnny is writing, bookmaker won't back rule change. We had a bit of a discussion with Johnny about that earlier on. And Young Guns handed trial by Schmidt. So Gary Doyle writing about the game against Argentina tomorrow. So lots of good stuff across the back pages this morning. It's just after 9 o'clock, Johnny, what's to look forward to this weekend from your point of view? I know there's a jockey debut, I think, that you're looking forward to.
Page 9 of the Racing Post today. That is none other than Michael Owen.
Right.
Now, if you're to follow him quite closely and look at the photo, he doesn't look the most natural, but far be it from me to lecture somebody on how to ride a horse, because it's not easy. He's riding at 12.15 in a charity race, and Michael Owen had gotten as far as 13 stone, which is hard to believe.
He's not a tall guy.
He's 5'8". You remember the pace he showed against the RGs back in the day, and he was all about speed, and what a player he was at his best.
He couldn't have been any more than about 9.5, 10 stone in his playing days.
Slightly more, maybe. Yeah. Maybe slightly more, but I think he's lost 2 stone. He's obviously gotten a huge interest in horse racing. I was at the Curragh when Brown Panther won the Ledger there a few years ago, and he was overcome with emotion. And it'll be very interesting to see how he goes. And he tells the Racing Post, "I'm riding a horse who gives me the best chance of winning," says excited Owen. So that's at 12.15. I'm looking forward to a horse called Sam Crow, who most people, I think Sam Crow is from some popular Netflix series, which escapes me, because if ever I look up Sam Crow on Twitter, I get a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with the horse. Sons of Anarchy. Thanks to
just the magic sort of answer appears out of nowhere.
The magic answer came from a guy who during a break gave me the best bagels I've had in a long time with cinnamon.
Right.
And Donica Boyle from the Indo will know what I'm on about. The
bar has been set by Tommy Rooney. Come on, Tommy.
The Keat bar has been set, but
he was outed in a very different way this week, so I think it's fair that we sort of redress the balance a bit. Yeah.
But this Sam Crow, so he's going to run at Navan on Sunday. Davy Russell has described him as the best horse we will ever see. Now, Davy Russell has ridden Don Cossack. He's ridden, War of Attrition. He's ridden Gold Cup winner as well. Sam Crow will run at probably be 4-1 on for Michael O'Leary and Gordon Elliott on Sunday at Navan. Watch him, and I would propose that you have a long-term wager on him win at Cheltenham. He's around about 5-1 to win the race he's running in. That's in March. But
on the Michael Owen one, have you ever tried riding?
I rode a horse called Mulligan in Kerry. We rode to the gap of, what was it again? The gap of something or other. Very scenic part of Kerry anyway. And I tried to ride him like I was in a race, but Mulligan he was probably older than me actually, and he was apt every 3 minutes to he just walked along very kind of laconically, and then he just bring me over and spend half a minute eating the grass on the side of the road, and I was like, Mulligan, come on. Yeah. But if you ever do it, and I've sometimes thought about doing it and getting into the charity race, your quad and all that's all your glute and all the the muscles in your thigh and hamstring area, you are in absolute agony after. You're just not used to it.
It's good stature for a jockey.
I could definitely be a jockey. The only thing stopping me from being a jockey, it's not weight, it's not temperament, it's not attitude, it's that I actually have an inability to ride horses.
Right. Crucial is, I would say, in terms of the job spec, it's probably number 1 on the list.
It'd be important, but it's I'd imagine it's an exhilarating experience, I
think so, yeah.
You're riding
there doing sort of 40 odd kilometres an hour.
40 kilometres an hour. Notwithstanding jumping a fence, but if you're riding in a 5 furlong race going as literally as fast as this horse can go, and you have to come through nearly the whole field, a la Richard Hughes in his heyday, I'd say, as was said back in the day by Mick Fitzgerald, better than sex or whatever, I'd say it's well up there anyway. It must be an amazing buzz. And they can time the winning line with such precision going at 40 miles an hour. The wider public have no idea how good jockeys are.
I'd say it is well up there.
We can only speculate,
Right, we've had some comments into us, including one on the back of our Jim McGuinness conversation a bit earlier on whether he should be involved as recommended this week by Kieran Shannon in the Ireland setup. Stephen Hunt, the former Republic of Ireland international, has been in touch with us to say that he thinks that's a great idea, and that if we're going to go down that road, that he himself, Stephen, should be allowed to manage the Waterford. I mean, he says Waterford GAA, I'm going to say the Waterford Hurlers.
We can only speculate.
I mean, This seems like this is a reality TV show in the making right here. Let's give you a bit of a flavour of what's happening across the off-the-ball platforms over the weekend. We're going to hear, I think, first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to hear from Cian Healy ahead of the Ireland-Argentina game tomorrow. He's been talking to Oisin.
Were there times when you were sidelined for that long period that you thought you might actually get back?
With the neck mainly, yeah. Everything else was known and has done a lot. Like the neck is just something that hasn't happened to too many people. So like if you rip a hammy off the bone, you're 5 months or so, or 6 months. And I said I wanted a target of 5 months, and the ankle was 8 weeks, and I said I wanted 4 weeks. And so you can put a judge on it. When it was something with the nervous system and structure like that, I didn't have a guideline of how quick it was going to be better, so couldn't be a little bit cocky about it. And that was a bit difficult because you're battling demons then about, is this going to affect your career, and then is it going to affect your life? Like, are you going to be able to turn the key in the door, because my arm had gone weak. So you just have to get on top of all of that stuff and keep as positive a mind frame as possible, and like that filling time with being with mates or going out for a coffee or walking the dogs. Dogs is very handy for injury, lads. It's if you have dogs in the house now, it burns time pretty easy, so that would have been spent a lot of my time.
So is that the plan for retirement, a dog walking service or anything like that, is it?
Oh Jesus, no. I couldn't manage more than 2.
Yeah, that was Neil Tracy in conversation with Cian Healy this week ahead of that big game tomorrow. You can check out that full piece over on offtheball.com. And it is to Neil Tracy we go. This is the slot every week where we do give our teams to give you the elevator pitch of what's coming up across the off-the-ball platforms this weekend. So it's to Premier League Live on Today FM we go to begin with, and Neil has the details.
This week on Premier League Live, we'll be at Old Trafford to see if Manchester United can bounce back from their midweek Champions League defeat against Basel. They're taking on Brighton and Hove Albion at Old Trafford. Ian Beach and Brian Kerr in the commentary box. And stay tuned at 5:30 because Philip Egan is going to be talking to former Republic of Ireland manager Owen Hand.
Yeah, so that is Premier League Live on good work from Neil Tracy there on Today FM. Coming up on 98 FM with the details is Derek Ryan.
On this week's show, Shane Byrne's going to join us to look back on Ireland's final November series game against Argentina on Saturday night, and the series overall as well. We're going to be joined by Republic of Ireland women's head coach Colin Bell to look ahead to their World Cup qualifier against the Netherlands next week. And we'll also hear the final part of our chat with Dublin legend Jason Sherlock, who'll tell us what life was like for him after the craziness of the All-Ireland win back in 1995. Now that's what I call sport. Sunday morning from 9 o'clock on 98 FM.
Yeah, and because Nathan Murphy did go to the trouble of putting something together to tell you what's on Off the Ball and News Talk this weekend, but just sort of messed up the recording a little bit, I can tell you what's coming up on the Saturday panel tomorrow. It's on the air on News Talk from 1 o'clock. Are going to be among the panellers Stewie Byrne and Shane Keegan as well. Dave and Kevin are going to talk through the afternoon's Premier League football, and then it's live Premier League on Sunday and Off the Ball from 1 o'clock with Joe and with Richie. It's Arsenal against their trip to Burnley. If we can see that Arsenal juggernaut, despite the defeat last night, continues. It's a 2 o'clock start, and that's going to be Nathan and Brian Kerr in the commentary box there. And it's over to Pat Nevin and Dave McIntyre, who are at Huddersfield against Manchester City in the late game. So that's what's coming up across the off-the-ball platforms this weekend. It's been a pleasure having you with us on this Friday morning. Johnny Ward, it's been a pleasure. You braved the cold conditions and you braved Black Friday and the devastating news that we're headed into a general election in the next few weeks to come and join us, and it's been a pleasure. I think we'll have you back.
Thanks very much, Adrian. It's been great fun.
That's pretty much it from us for today. The lads will be back on your screens from Monday morning at 7:45 a.m. And Brian O'Driscoll is going to talk. It's podcast tonight time on Off the Ball and News Talk. He's going to be joined by none other. Of course, it's Argentina, then Felipe Contepomi. But for myself, for this morning from OTBAM, good morning.